Hi everyone, in today's session I will guide you through the hardware asset module in ServiceNow. By the end of this session you will understand all the fields on the hardware asset form, their meanings and how to create a hardware asset. As previously mentioned in this course, a hardware asset is a physical item such as computer, mobile phone, servers or printers. However, there is a misconception that ServiceNow only track hardware asset. This is not true. You can track any type of physical assets, including mechanical assets, video production equipment, medical equipment, laboratory instruments, industrial machinery, telecommunication equipments, and more. In today's example, I will be creating an asset for the Apple MacBook Pro 14, for which I created a hardware model in previous session. Now that I have explained what hardware assets are, I will proceed to create one in ServiceNow. Now we are into the demo. Please note you are logged in with the admin role or have the asset role associated with the user account. Now we will go to the application navigator and type hardware asset. Now we will click on the hardware asset module under the filter navigation. Here you will see a list of default hardware asset records. Now we will click on new. A new blank hardware asset form will open. As we complete this form, explanation for each field will be provided for better understanding. The first comes the display name. This field shows concatenated value from the asset tag and model field by default, making it useful for viewing hardware assets in the list or reports. Now comes the model category. This lets you choose the asset category. For example, I will select computer here to show only computer hardware model related records. Now in the model field, I will select a hardware model record. In this, I will choose MacBook Pro 14 created in the previous session. Now comes the configuration item. When creating a hardware asset, if the selected category has a defined CI class, a CI record is automatically created and linked. For this computer, a computer CI class is associated, so a link to the CI record will appear here. Now comes the quantity. For hardware asset, this is always set to 1 and cannot be changed. Now in this form, you will see 7 tabs. The first tab is general, contain all the general related fields. The first field is asset tag, used to capture the unique asset applied by your organization. I will enter Q1001 for this example. Now next is the state field, used to track the physical state of the asset, such as in use, on order, in stock, in transit, in maintenance, retired, missing or built. The default state of the new hardware asset is always in use. The state and the sub-state field works together. So if we go ahead and select like in stock, it will enable the sub-state option based on the selected state. So for this example, I will select the state as in use. Now next comes the assigned to, where you specify the end users assigned to this asset. This helps track which assets are assigned to which user. So for example, I will select here able tutor. This field refers to the sys_user table, so any stored users can be selected. Now next comes managed by. So here you can designate who in your organization is responsible for managing these assets. I will put Chad Miklas for an example. Now next comes owned by. It lets you indicate the financial owner of this asset within your organization. So for this example, I will select Andrew Jackson. Now comes the parent option. Here you specify a parent asset. Choosing another asset as a parent automatically designate the current asset as a child. These features allow you to create a hierarchical structure for tracking interconnected assets. It's especially useful for servers and their individual hard drives. I will leave this field as blank for now, but I will demonstrate creating a parent-child hierarchy in future session. Now comes the class. You will find that this field is only read-only field. It shows the category of asset group it's part of. For hardware asset like this one, the class will always be hardware. It could also display baseline or consumable depending on the type of asset being created. For instance, if you're making a consumable, it will show consumable. This field is essential for asset management to report on the classification of all assets. Now next comes the comment field where you can add any notes or comments you need. Next up is the serial number, which is crucial for the IT asset management. It stores manufacturer's unique serial number, allowing you to manage physical assets with their records in the system. This field is vital for easy asset identification. So for example, I will input some random characters here. Since we have already covered substate field, I will skip this for now. Now comes the location. The location field, you specify exactly where the asset physically resides, where it is in the country, state, building, or office. It is advisable to track the assets at the building at the room level to make finding them easier later on. This field might already be filled because when an asset is assigned to a user, the system automatically updates the location based on the user whereabouts. This saves you time when managing asset. As for the department field, it tells you which department the asset belongs to, typically pre-filled with the department of the assigned user. That is able tutor. Now comes the company, where you define the owning organization or company of the asset. It's handy for tracking assets that might not belong to your company directly. For instance, if you lease or rent asset, you can indicate the actual owner here. This field might already be filled because it is populated from the assigned user company. Now comes the asset function. This defines the function of an asset. Is it primary, secondary, or shared, loaner, or asset bundle? Next comes the assigned field. Here you can specify the date and time when the asset was assigned to the end user. So I will select today's date. Now the next come installed. In this field you can specify the date and time when the asset was installed. So again I will select today's date. Now we will go to the financial tab. So here you can track financial information related to this specific hardware asset. So the first line here is the request line. Here you can specify the item request associated with this asset. Usually this item request originates from the product or service catalog in the portal. Since there is no request for this asset currently, I will leave it blank. However, in the future, as we progress in this course, I will make sure that an asset request is added to this field. Now comes the invoice number. In this field, you can enter the invoice number associated with the acquisition of the asset. This is useful for linking invoices to the asset and facilitates audit by providing a clear link between the assets and its procurement documentation. I will enter a random number here for now. Now comes the cost. In the cost field, you can input the price of the asset along with the currency used for the transaction. However, this field is automatically populated by the hardware model, so I will keep it unchanged for now. Now in the vendor field, you can specify the supplier from the asset this was procured. So for this example, I will enter Amazon. Now comes eligible for refresh. This field introduces a new functionality in asset management, allowing us to track the expected lifespan of an hardware model. When a specific asset reaches the end of its expected life, this flag will mark it as eligible for refresh, indicating that it's time to consider replacing or upgrading the asset. Now comes open field. You can specify when this request was made, as mentioned in the request line. It is important to note that this field is automatically filled when a request line is selected. Now next is GL account. It stands for general ledger. Here you input the account number for this asset in your fixed asset financial system. For now, I will use random numbers. Now comes cost center. Here you identify the group or the department financially responsible for this asset. Now comes acquisition method. Here you indicate the default method of acquiring the asset. Option include purchase, lease, rent, loan. Please note the default value is purchase for the asset generated via purchase order. In this example, I will select purchase. Now comes the expenditure type. If the asset was bought as a capital expense or an operational expense, it is crucial for financial reporting. CapEx signifies one-time purchase like buying a server outright. OpEx indicates ongoing purchase such as in ink cartridges. In this instance, I will select CapEx since the MacBook Pro workstation was bought outright. Now we move to the disposal tab. Here you can track disposition details for the hardware asset, useful for documenting its disposal. So first is disposable reason. Here you provide the reason for disposing of the asset. For instance, in this demonstration, we will pretend that we are disposing of this Mac computer because its specification became outdated. So I will enter outdated specs. Now next comes beneficiary. Here you designate the IT asset disposition vendor, that is ITAD, responsible for disposing of asset. For demonstration purpose, I will select Novel as an out-of-box in ServiceNow. While there are no actual ITAD vendor in the system, you would typically collaborate with the companies like Iron Mountain or Ingram Micro. You would specify their name here for accurate record keeping. Now comes the resale price. Here you input the value at which the asset was worth when it was disposed or sold out. For demonstration purpose, I will enter here $70. Now comes scheduled retirement. Here you specify the date you plan to retire your asset, helping your organization retirement schedules in advance. For demo, I will select a date that is 5 years from now, as asset typically get disposed of after 5 years period. So I will go and select, let's say, January, June, and today's date is 10th. Now comes the retired date. Here you input the actual date when the asset will be retired. For now, I will leave it blank. Now then we will go to the depreciation tab. Here you choose the depreciation method for an asset by clicking on the magnifying glass. You can see all available depreciation method including double declining balance and straight line. You might have noticed that this is already populated because when we created the hardware model in the previous session, we set the depreciation method there. This means that whenever you create a depreciation method at the hardware model level, it automatically applies to any asset created using this model. Now comes the depreciation effective date. This marks the date from which we want the asset depreciation to start. Usually it's the purchase date, but for example, I will select today's date. Now comes the salvage value. Here you input the value of the asset which is worth at the end of its useful life. This value affects the calculation of the asset depreciated value, like the depreciation field. You will see this field already filled from the selected hardware model. Now comes the residual date field. We have, and you can see this is only read only field and automatically calculated by the system. This field displays the date when the asset will be fully depreciated at the system start its depreciation calculation. For instance, if we select June 10th, the depreciation is effective date field and choose a straight line depreciation method spanning 5 years. Upon saving the assets, you will see June 10th, 2029 is the residual field date. Now comes residual field value. This is also read only and calculated automatically by the system. Here you will see the remaining value of the asset after it's being fully depreciated. Now comes depreciated amount. In this field, depreciated amount, you will see automatically calculated amount an asset has depreciated so far its life cycle. Now, below this form, we will find covered asset fixed embedded list. Here you link the hardware asset record to the fixed asset record. Fixed asset records are usually managed by the finance and the accounting team rather than the IT asset management team. If your organization tracks fixed asset in ServiceNow, you wish to link the hardware asset to its fixed asset counterparts, simply click on the magnifying glass and add the fixed asset record. Now we will go to the contract section. Here you can track all the contractual information related to the asset and establish connection to one or more contract. In the first field, we have the lease contract. Here you can enter the name of the lease contract if applicable. For example, I will leave this field blank right now. Next come warranty expiration. Here you can input the warranty expiration date for the asset if applicable. Tracking warranty can save your organization money, as engineers can have assets repaired by the manufacturer at no charge rather than fixing them in-house. So by default, I will take 1 year as the hardware warranty of this laptop. Now comes the support group field. Here you specify the group responsible for asset in case of an incident. For example, I will select hardware. Then next comes supported by. In this field, you can specify the individual responsible for supporting this asset if applicable. For example, I will enter Best Marso. Now below these fields, there is an asset covered embedded list. Here you can link the asset to a contract in the system. Please note that you can also establish this connection from the contract record in the contract application. Now moving to the entitlement tab. Here you view the software licenses that this particular hardware asset is entitled to use. These entitlements are established in the Software Asset Management module. Since our focus is primarily on ITAM in this course, I will skip these details on configuring hardware-based software entitlements. Now, the last comes activities. You can log notes here related to your asset. For instance, notes on repairs made, any damages observed, and more. Now, to save this hardware asset, we go ahead and click on Submit at the top right of this form. Now, we can go ahead and find the asset that we have created right now. And this concludes our session on hardware asset. Thank you so much.